You're busy, you've got a decent practice, but nobody wants to be decent. You want to be great, and you want to have a great practice. So how did the most productive, profitable dentist in the nation balance real life, work, and profits, and somehow make it all seem fun? Well, it comes down to simple, everyday practices. So grab a lunch, join us as we chat with top clinicians and influencers to discover their formula for uncommon success. Are you ready? Then it's time to explore everyday practices with Vicki McManus-Peterson and Dr. Chad Johnson.
Everybody, welcome to Everyday Practices. This is Chad Johnson with my special co-host right now. Hey, how you doing, Regan?
I'm doing exceptional. I am very excited for today's podcast, Chad.
I know. Today, Dr. Roy Shelburne is on. Dr. Roy, how you doing?
I am excellent. Thanks. How about you?
I'm doing fine. I want to read your bio just so that way people kind of have an idea of who we're talking with today. If you haven't, if you've been under a rock on media about presentations and CE courses and whatnot, because Dr. Shelburne is coming up here speaking at Smiles at Sea, and you can find him on online, every weekend or every week, going to at least one place, maybe three. So Dr. Roy Shelburne graduated from the University of Virginia with a double major in biology and religious studies. He went on to graduate from VCU Dental School and opened a private general practice in Pennington Gap, Virginia in 1981. He and his family has served as short-term volunteer missionaries with the Baptist Medical Dental Missions International and on various Mission of Mercy projects in Virginia. In March 2008, he surrendered his dental license after being convicted of healthcare fraud, racketeering, and money laundering, and spent 19 months in federal prison and 2 months in a halfway house. Dr. Shelburne is a nationally known speaker, writer, consultant, and an ADA subject matter expert who openly shares his mistakes, what he learned as a result, and how to avoid these career-ending errors. And in the quote that we'd like to read is a wise man who learns from his mistakes, but a wiser man still that learns from another's. Dr. Roy, thanks for joining us today.
I'm happy to be here. I bet you haven't had a CV like that before, have you?
I know. I love how transparent it is, because you wear it as a badge of honor to some degree, because you are, I think you bring something to the profession that if there was a peer of yours in that category, I doubt they'd want to share that. And so the fact that you said, okay, I'm going to humble myself to share about this so that way no other dentist has to do that again. Am I kind of hitting the nail on the head?
You are preaching my sermon, young man, and it's a badge of dishonor, one that I don't proudly own, but I own because I feel that there's a need in the industry to understand that there are dangers that for most of us, are unaware of. I'm that guy. I always thought if I got monies I wasn't entitled to or anything that I wasn't deserving, I could give it back with any interest or penalties that were due. Was never given that option. The best option I ever got to settle was 3 years in prison and a restitution of $300,000. So that's not much of an incentive. I was confused and wrong about a lot of things. So I share what I discovered. I'm the industry's crash dummy, if you will. And
yeah.
I'm not proud of it, but
right.
Like I said, somebody needs to tell the story because it's real and it's relevant, especially in today's world. There's so much regulation and oversight that's going on, and Big Brother's looking over our shoulders, and there's no such thing as an innocent mistake.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the misunderstandings I had was the definition of intent when it comes to intent to defraud. I knew it meant if you submitted claims for a patient you never saw, for a service you never did. Certainly if you did that intentionally, that's fraud. But the legal definition is much broader of intent. From a legal standpoint, it includes instances where you do the same thing the same way and don't have systems to identify and correct your errors. That's considered blind disregard for the accuracy of what you're doing, and that is intent to defraud.
Wait, that was so quick.
Yeah. Slow it down.
Okay.
No. What I was trying to think in my mind, and I kept up until definition of intent. So give me an example again. You said what now?
So in my case, I was investigated from 2003 back 6 years. And during that time, for example, there was a code for extractions, a primary one for your first, and then additional codes for any additional extractions at the same appointment, kind of like PAs are now. First PAs, one rate, the second, third, fourth are a different code.
Yeah.
So in my practice, occasionally we would do 3 extractions at a time, and the code we used was the primary code, 7110 for number 1, number 2, and number 3. When number 2 and number 3 needed to be billed as 7120, those were additional extractions at the same appointment. We miscoded it. We got paid for all 3 as if they were primary, and I got $2.64 more for the second and third than I was entitled to.
Regan, doesn't that blow your mind?
And
it terrifies me, actually, because
and the issue is that you have to have systems to identify and correct those errors. And what a lot of people don't understand, for example, if you accept payment from the government in any of its plans, so that would include Medicare and Medicaid. Most people are aware of that. That's a government type of reimbursement plan. But if you see patients who are insured under the Affordable Health Care Act, or federal employees, or dependent of active duty military, any reimbursement that you receive from any entity that even a portion of it is paid by the government, then there is a 7-step compliance program that is mandated that will assure that you are doing your due diligence, and it takes blind disregard off the table. And when I'm speaking, I do speak a lot, as Chad said. I'll ask my audiences, how many of you have implemented that 7-step compliance program in your practice? Because almost everybody sees government employees. They see dependent active duty military. They see people with coverage with the Affordable Health Care Act. I ask, how many of you have this plan in place? And I have had 2 people raise their hand that said, yes, we have in fact adopted that plan. And I always ask, how is it that you came about establishing? How did you determine you needed that? And in both cases, they had an issue with the government where they became aware that it was mandated.
Is this the System for Award Management, SAM program?
No.
Okay.
You can go on the website, and if they want a copy of that, it's an outline and the 7 steps. Be happy to share that with them. If you want to give them my email, if they just want to reach out, I'll be happy to fire that off to you. You can Google it.
Yep.
7-step federal mandated compliance program, and it'll bring it up, and you can look at that. But it makes sense. But if you implement that program, it takes the blind disregard out of play. You've done what's considered reasonable to identify and correct your errors. So you're working to be able to say, I'm doing it right, and I want to do it right. I was asked, what kind of compliance program did I have in my practice? And I said, compliance program, what do you mean?
Right.
Which indicated that I was laboring under what's considered blind disregard. We got paid, and we didn't have a system to identify and correct those errors, where we could have looked at it and seen that the second and third extractions in the example I used should have been coded differently, and that would have taken the blind disregard off the table.
How many, Roy, how many, when you're speaking and you ask people to raise their hands, how many follow some sort of a compliance program?
2 people in the entire universe of audiences I've spoken to. Yeah.
Wow.
People just kind of get this glazed over look in your eye. And it's another one of those things in dental school. As far as business skills, we're given none. As far as compliance skills, we have none. But yet we are held responsible for HIPAA compliance, for OSHA compliance, from compliance from a legal standpoint. Like I said, in our world, ignorance is no excuse.
There are so many side view and rear view mirrors that we have to be checking. It leaves a lot of plates spinning, unfortunately, that we don't realize. So Regan, Dr. Roy came to speak, and I wonder what year that was. I bet it was maybe 2012 or 2013. And
probably so, yeah.
Yeah, and you came in and you were sharing with the dental, like the county dental association meeting, and I came up to you either at lunch or whatnot, and I said, "Hey, you want to grab dinner tonight? And I mean, if there weren't
You were
1,000 people there,
smart, Chad.
well, if there weren't 1,000 people there, but for some reason I just thought, I'd ask him, like, hey, you got plans for tonight? Is your family here or just you alone? And he's like, yeah, I'm just traveling alone. So he came to dinner, and from there on out, we've had a fun relationship, a fun friendship. We've even done dental missions together in Bland, Virginia. There's a place there called the Bland Ministry Center, and it's kind of near his hometown. And by kind of, it's maybe an hour and a half away.
2.5.
Is it 2.5? Okay.
It is.
And so even when I've stopped over there, I've passed through Dr. Roy's neighborhood, and we've gone to dinner, did church together, and stuff like that. So we've come to know each other pretty well, especially online. That's the beauty of Facebook. But Regan, that's why I thought it would be an honor to have him on here. For sure, people have heard of Dr. Roy, but it's been fun getting to know him on a personal level. But there's so much professionally that we have to learn from him. And I mean, so at the end of the written notes for this podcast, we'll make sure to include at least, if we can't do a hyperlink, but we'll at least try and include the link for that compliance thing. I think that would be gold. So
As a non-dental practice owner, it took my anxiety from a 10 down to about a 2, just to know that there's an instant resource available to me. And Chad, to underline what you said, I've had so many doctors that come to me and they have tears in their eyes, or they're just full out crying. And it's because of, like you said, all of the side mirrors, rear view mirrors, front mirrors that you have to look as a dental practice owner.
Right.
And it's got to be, the don't know what you don't know has got to be pretty terrifying. And in Roy's case, that's kind of the severe, the severe result, I guess you would see it. And so, Roy, you could have taken it and been game over, right? Served your time, been done.
Well, actually, it kind of was. As a result of the conviction, my license was revoked. I was charged with healthcare fraud, racketeering, and money laundering, and because I was charged with racketeering and money laundering, they confiscated everything we owned when I was arrested. So they took possession of all the bank accounts. When I was arrested, there was 5 FBI vehicles with 10 officers all together, and then 3 flatbed car haulers. And I was being read my rights. They were pulling the vehicles out of the garage and onto flatbeds. Hadn't been to court, hadn't had an opportunity to be able to defend myself at all, but yet they're allowed to go ahead and confiscate everything that you own. So try to put together a defense, continue to pay your attorney, pay expert witnesses with nothing, absolutely nothing, no bank accounts, nothing else. So, like I said, it was challenging. Losing my license was, the height of, I guess, despair. And I want to put it in perspective as well. Although what happened to me is probably the worst thing that could happen professionally to a dental person, it doesn't hold a candle to a sick family member, a loss of a loved one. So, I want to put it in perspective too. There are things a lot worse in life that can happen.
Sure.
I was released in May of 2010. I was on probation for 3 years, no license to be able to practice dentistry. So I actually went to work in a dental lab for about 7-8 months. That was something, graduating in dental school in 1981. Familiar with the lab, we could do labs, so I had those skills to be able to do that. Was able to reapply for my license again in December of 2011. The minimum period of revocation in Virginia is 3 years, so I could reapply for my license reinstatement in July of 2011. And it takes the whole board to act on the request for reinstatement, as well as it takes the whole board to act on the revocation. So went to the board on December 1st of 2011. I'd done probably 450 hours of CE in the 3 years that my license was revoked.
You basically did dental school twice.
Right.
I rotated through the clinic at VCU at the dental school. I had spent 32 hours in the different departments there. so they could observe my ability, and they wrote a letter recommendation that my license be reinstated. I took my boards over again, which was fun. The second time around was a little easier. And I presented all that information to the board. They asked me to leave, and they deliberated for a little over an hour and a half. I came back in, and the board chairman stood, and he said, "Dr. Shelburne, this has not been an easy one for us. We talked for a while, we yelled for a while, and we screamed at one another for a while, but we've come to a consensus. We're going to give your license back." So it came full circle.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the American Dental Association was supportive. I was always active in the local association. And I'd gotten my dues for reinstatement or dues for payment in November while I was in prison. And I sent a letter back to the Virginia Dental Association, and I said, you know where I am. I don't have a license. I certainly can't afford to pay these, so I'm going to have to let my membership lapse. And I got a letter back from the director of the Virginia Dental Association, Terry Dickinson, Texas guy, good guy, wrote back and said, if and until you can pay your dues on your own, we'll keep you an active member. We'll comp them for you.
Nice.
So as far as organized dentistry, they were supportive as they could be under the circumstances.
Very cool. So, hey, Dr. Roy, tell our listeners how much was at stake. I don't know how to word it. How much?
The numbers.
Talk about the numbers real quick, because Regan, your jaw will drop when he tells you, like, so Roy, I won't steal your thunder.
So they did an investigation over 6 years because the statute of limitation of fraud is 6 years. So from the search and seizure in 2003, I was in, here's my ADD kicking in. I was at the American Dental Association meeting in San Francisco in 2003 when my wife called me to let me know that the FBI had come to my office. They had battered down the back door and were taking all my records. So for that period of 3 years, I was investigated and was arrested. And this time of year, I get a little bit on the squirrely side. The search and seizure happened October 24th, and then the arrest on October 27th. I practiced in my grandfather's hardware store building. I came back home and lowered the ceiling and put the equipment under the floor, and I practiced there for 27 years. And the investigation was over 6 years, and Lee County is one of the poorest, if not the poorest, in the state of Virginia. So over 90% of the individuals under 18 had Medicaid. So I had a very active Medicaid practice. So that 6 year period, I was paid $3.5 million for the services that we had provided for our patients, our Medicaid patients. And the amount that the government established of the $3.5 million I got that I wasn't entitled to was $17,899.57. That's 0.01% of the amount that I collected. And I thought that was a pretty decent error percentage, but they didn't think so. And even though we were able to go back through that 6 year period and identify treatment that I had provided, should have billed for, could have billed for, and hadn't, in excess of that amount, it made no difference. Interesting thing, it had to be a jury trial, and the jury is never made aware of the amount. They saw pictures of my house and the vacations that we had taken, and the motive that the government established for my committing healthcare fraud was to fund my lavish lifestyle. How you do that on $17,899.57 over the course of 6 years, I don't know, but that was my motive. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Well, it leaves me a little speechless because, it's going to come down to that defense. Sorry, go ahead, Chad.
No, Roy, didn't you say that that after things were audited, on the back half, didn't that number change? I thought at one point that you said that when you had done your own audit of
we established that there was work that I could have been billed for in excess of that amount. It made no difference. We did that by mistake, and we did the fraud by intent.
Yeah, but when you had figured out what possibly that you had underbilled for, that the number actually was larger than that 17,000. What am I not correct?
No, you're correct. If we had billed for everything that we could have billed for during that period, had left nothing on the table, they would have owed us money.
Regan, doesn't that blow your mind?
It's one of those, well, if you ever get that tightness in your chest where you know that there's an injustice and you're so frustrated with
That's
it,
right.
and it gets down to semantics. And when he said, Dr. Roy, when you said intent and the definition of intent, I don't know, when I was in my school days, I was a really big debate junkie, and definitions are, you can make or break on the value of a definition.
Bring your lunch or take us to the gym again next week to improve your everyday practices. Also, subscribe on iTunes, follow us on social media, and sign up for our email list. Now get out there and win with everyday practices.